So I think we can begin if that's okay for everyone. Thank you for joining us once again. This is the first webinar of the African Alliance of Subnational Development Banks. Thank you for joining us. As I said previously, you have the button interpretation in the lowest bar of the menu of your screen. So don't hesitate to click on the language you prefer, French or English. So we are very happy to have this conversation. You know that the accreditation to the green funds is very key in our conversations. We had many conversations already, dialogues around this topic, and this is somehow a deeper conversation we'll have. And we thank him, Marcus Mayr from the Green Climate Fund, is the urban sector specialist. He will present and introduce the regionalization strategy of the GCF for us to better understand what lies in that strategy, what is possible, and the potential for subnational development banks. We'll have then FEICOM, Jean-Aloïse Biwolé, the Director for Cooperation. FEICOM, as you know, is the SDB from Cameroon. FEICOM is chair of the African Alliance. He will explain the process of accreditation to the Adaptation Fund, the opportunities and what it means also for SDB to comply with the norms and proceedings of this kind of funds. And last but not least, we'll have DBSA, the SDB from South Africa, with Olympus, Manthata, and Muhammed who will explain the whole process of being accredited to the GCF, what it means to build the pipelines of projects for the GCF, and the use of the funds that you get from a green climate fund. If you are ready, Marcus, maybe we can begin. Fantin, you will do the slides, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go to the first series of slides. Perfect. Marcus?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Carlos. Dear colleagues, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a big pleasure to speak to you today. Unfortunately, I have to send apologies from our regional director, Ms. Kaufman. She has, unfortunately, is not able to join today, but she sends you regards and also wants me to deliver this presentation to you to bring you closer to the Green Climate Fund, as we have great ambition to work more with national development banks going forward. And so my name is Marcus Mayr. I'm the urban sector specialist in the Department of the Africa region. And before we begin, I show you my email. If you have any questions, any further questions, please do not hesitate to write to me. The Africa department is there for you and as our core partners. So absolutely no hesitation to write to me any questions on any matters concerning collaborating with the Green Climate Fund. And so I'm going to speak for about 10 minutes to 15 minutes to you today about the new strategy of the GCF and what we can do in the Africa region together. So I've tried to summarize on just one slide. Go back, please. On just one slide, the strategy for the new Department of the Africa region. And this is all we have to say to you today, is we would like, together with you, inspire more climate action. That is our whole strategy. And our strategy is broken down in a few operational objectives. Next slide, please. Is that the next slide? I think there's one in between. And so the overall GCF strategic plan gives us a few target results that we would like to achieve with you. And the Africa strategy can be summarized not only as inspire more climate action, but also to reassure you that GCF doesn't come with any new strategy that we developed in our offices. We simply want to support the African Union agenda and the agenda of the various countries across the continent to achieve more climate impact. We want to support you in advancing the implementation of your NDCs and NAPs, double the number of direct access entities with GCF funding. And direct access entities, we mean national entities that have access to GCF. So national development banks are a core partner under this strategy, and we want to accredit more of you to work more with GCF. We would like to establish new or improved early warning systems, have an investment priority in agriculture, terrestrial and marine ecosystems, low emission climate resilient infrastructure, energy, transport, buildings and industry, and locally led adaptation. And we would like to do so by providing the early stage and seed capital for both the private sector, but also for the public sector to enable leverage and enable the mobilization of even more money for climate change. And enable, that's the last point on the right side, enable national and regional financial institutions to access GCF resources and other green finance. And so that's why we consider national, regional, and national financial institutions as our core partner going forward. And no better way to speak that to an audience of colleagues from national development banks. Next slide, please. The programming priorities for the Africa region and GCF as a whole is we want to empower developing countries as the capacity builder and also as the delivery partners for our readiness program to help you as national development banks, working closely with your national governments to translate the climate promises, the climate strategies and policies into concrete climate investment planning and programming. We would like not only that you understand GCF as a source of financing, but also as a source of capital that can help you mobilize private sector investments to invest in climate. We will be able to assume risks that nobody else can take in the market to mobilize private sector capital. We would like to help you improve access to GCF resources through our readiness program, through project preparation funding, so that we enable our national partners to access GCF resources directly. In the past, especially in Africa, delivery has been through international entities, and we believe now it's time for national entities to take the driver's seat and be the main source of delivery for the African continent and climate action. And very important for our new director is our focus is on the most vulnerable populations. And therefore, there is a very clear overlay between development goals and climate goals addressing the most vulnerable. Next slide, please. Just to give you a small overview on our investment priorities, you're thinking about working with GCF. GCF has broadly 8 investment criteria, 8 investment areas. This is energy, transport and mobility, buildings, cities, industries, forests and land use. Those are our 4 mitigation areas. Livelihoods of peoples and communities, health, food and water security, infrastructure in the built environment, ecosystem and ecosystem services. We do have all our projects online. If you have a project idea, there's a very high chance we have already funded a project like this. I invite you to check our website, greenclimate.fund, under projects to get inspiration how to structure projects. Overall, we have committed over $15 billion, mobilizing an additional 36 for an overall investment of over $61 billion. So GCF is not only a climate fund, but is also a very strong business partner for expanding your business in the green and climate area going forward. Next slide, please. Now, very briefly, the process for accessing climate finance is the following. We are a country-driven mechanism, meaning that our countries are in the driver's seat. We have the national designated authorities, your ministries, that are setting the policy direction through NDCs, NAPs, and other programs and other strategies to give the overall investment prioritization for a country. We then are a institution that builds partnerships, can support building partnerships in your countries with you as national development banks, with civil society and the private sector to develop funding proposals. And those funding proposals could be a range of sectors that I just presented, but also GCF is happy to extend a range of financial instruments to you as national development banks. This ranges from small-scale grant financing to large-scale loan and concessional loan guarantees and other risk mitigating instruments. As a next point that I want to mention is it is very important to understand GCF has a mandate to achieve a balanced investment between mitigation and adaptation, roughly 50-50. That is, we look for investing both in mitigation and adaptation. And a large portion of our funding, over 50%, is reserved for least developed countries, African states, and SIDS to invest in adaptation, benefiting the most vulnerable. So there's a large amount of our financing reserved for clients like you to invest in countries that need climate support the most. Last but not least, our concessional financing is considerably different from the concessional financing you know from the World Bank and AFDB, for example. We have very high concessionality. We have very high risk appetite, patient capital with long tenure. And so it is no secret that our conditions are far superior to what you find in the market. Now, that means that use those financing instruments wisely to maybe even achieve leverage and mobilize additional finance for a greater impact. And GCF supports upstream work through supporting the NDC and NAP development and investment planning, identifying capable entities like yourselves to develop priorities into projects, supporting project pre-feasibility, economic financial analysis, supporting the identification of climate and finance needs and co-financing, all towards concept note submission, which is the first step in our project cycle. And once this is achieved, you have access to project preparation financing, very generous to, for example, support the project development, environmental and social impact assessments, implementation plans, and so on, to arrive at the final funding proposal, submission, appraisal, and hopefully approval. So we are able to support you along the whole value chain from national goals to concrete investments. Next slide, please. Now, I was informed prior to this meeting of a few of the attendees, and I have made a small list here. So working with national development banks and subnational development banks is a big priority for us going forward. We do have a few partners, only a few partners across the African continent that are already accredited and have a portfolio with us. For example, I'm showing here all the countries that I was told that are participating today. We have, of course, a very prominent and leading example with us today. The Development Bank of Southern Africa is already accredited, has a very large portfolio, and will surely be able to tell you a lot of the tips and tricks how to program with GCF. But also the CDG of Morocco is accredited to the GCF. We have the Development Bank of Tanzania is accredited. And a few of you who are here today are nominated officially from the national focal points. For example, DBN in Namibia, ANFIC from Niger, FEC, ANICT in Malawi, in Mali, ANAFIC in Guinea, and GIF in Ghana. Now, I showed you also here the national designated entities. Those are our focal points, national focal points in the country, similar to what you would be used to working with ministries of finance. Now, as we're a mechanism under the Paris Agreement, oftentimes we are having our national focal points in the ministries of environment. Often, not always. And so I listed here the national focal points. So if you're not nominated yet as a GCF potentially accredited entity, a first step could be to get in touch with those national designated authorities to express your interest to be accredited and to be able to mobilize finance for supporting both development and climate goals. Now, if you have already been nominated, and maybe you can ask the colleagues that have already achieved this on best strategies to get this nomination. It's a simple letter on our end to be received. Then you are able to start the accreditation process. And this is a three-step process where we check first of all, we check some basic principles on the institutional capacity, fiduciary capacity, the policy alignment between GCF, if you have the capacity to implement environmental and social safeguards, for example, fiduciary requirements, and so on. And then once this second step is done, you move to the third stage to develop a concrete accreditation master agreement to specify the details of accreditation and then move forward to be an accredited entity with GCF. And at that stage, you're able to program with us, develop concrete projects and programs. And it's half art and half science. So if you have specific questions on accreditation, please do not hesitate to contact me. I'm happy to set up a call with our accreditation specialist based on where in Africa you're located. We have specific teams that are looking, for example, after Western North Africa and the rest, so that we'd be happy to put together a concrete call with our accreditation team to ask specific questions and further guide you on the process. Now, I want to end with motivating all of you to consider GCF accreditation as a priority for your organization. You will be able to mobilize significant financial resources to expand your business that you're already doing in the country, potentially opening a new investment area in your national or subnational development bank on green and climate financing. GCF is just one of many players supporting this with significant financial resources, and it oftentimes is a signal to the market that you're meeting high ESS standards and ESG standards, and is also something that helps you with your normal business transactions and refinancing. So I want you to encourage you to seek this accreditation, use it as a corporate priority. We are looking for more partners like yourselves across the continent to invest in all parts of the economy of your countries. Typically, we have had, I would say, smaller grant-based organizations accredited to GCF that have a very limited scope of project development, of project finance, that we are seeing there's a barrier on mobilizing more climate finance for many of your countries is this fact that we have entities that are not able to move beyond small scale or micro scale projects. And therefore, we have a high hope that more and more of your financial institutions are becoming accredited to the GCF to develop national co-investment platforms, bundling multiple small projects together for a national investment facility, sector programs, or similar transaction going forward, whereby we can achieve more scale and more scope with a single transaction. And therefore, I think I've said it many times, please do not hesitate to contact me. Should you wish to do so, we'd be happy to help you move forward. I think I have extended my time. I leave you in good hands with our accredited entities that you have with you today, and looking forward to engaging with you in the future. Colleagues, over to you. Any
Thank you.
questions, answers, I'm happy to take.
Yes, thank you, Marcus. This is a very clear presentation and inspiring one. Maybe, yes, we'll open now for a few minutes the Q&A. If we have people from the participants, from the audience who want to step in, happy to do so now. Edna, I don't know if you can introduce yourself. Oh, you disappeared. Edna, did you want to ask a question to Marcus? No, maybe it was. So just one question, Marcus. You know that for the most of the subnational development banks that are part of the alliance, most of them are small financial institutions. They usually work with decentralization processes. Some of them have developed some financing instruments for local governments in certain sectors or for certain programs. Africa is a complex continent for when it comes to localizing finance. I would like to understand from you, maybe you were talking about national co-investment platforms. If you had some examples of this specific way of mobilizing, putting together the players at the national level.
Thank you. So whether you're a small financial institutions or a large one, we'll find a way to collaborate with you. And GCF funding can be on balance sheet and off balance sheet. So we'll find a way for you to handle GCF investments in the country. On co-investment platforms, it's a big word that's been floating around. It is, and you know that many people understand different things behind it. So I leave this to you to define. But we are seeing, for example, with the Development Bank of Nigeria, we're working on a subnational co-investment platform where they would put together a facility, so to speak, that they manage, which we can capitalize, other players can capitalize. Then we would create sort of asset classes that are investable under these facilities. And then project proponents in the country can apply for those funds. So this is a sort of a bundling mechanism. We see the government of Rwanda, for example, has put together the Rwanda Green Fund. That is, at least for GCF in Africa, I believe, a very successful model. They have mobilized over 120 million GCF funding, and I'm not sure if they are part of this call. I hope I'm not saying anything secret here. Talk to them. They have mobilized 120 million GCF money through their Rwanda Green Fund, and I think over 400 from other sources. So that's a significant amount, and basically it's a secretariat with a staff that is able to coordinate with various government players in Rwanda. Priorities, then is able through their technical staff able to translate those priorities into funding proposals. We all know somebody needs to write the things, and so it's an institution. It's literally we always like to say think tank, but it's the opposite. It's a do platform, and through this experience, they have also a good procurement team, ESS team, so they are able to translate those goals, policies into practice. And it's a very competent team they have to mobilize money. That's a example to look at. We're in a few other cases, I know, for example, FEC in Morocco. I'm not sure if they're part of this call. In my former job with AFDB, we had a very successful subnational lending with them. There are many good examples across the continent, and I think rather than chasing abstract theories and abstract and new concepts, I think it is very wise to study the successful examples on the continent. And this could be a facility, this could be we are helping a national development bank to capitalize, start a new loan portfolio on green climate lending, for example, or with we're talking with, what is it called? Shelter Afrique about the new loan product. This is something that, as the closer it is to your core business, the more successful it will be. So if you're doing, and it's a while since I'm working with FEICOM, for example, you're very good at supporting, social infrastructure across the country. So putting together a program or a co-investment facility for climate resilient social infrastructure across the country could help mobilize a lot of finance from the GCF. And correct me if I'm wrong, and your business model has evolved. I hope I summarized that well. So I think stick as close as possible to your business model, identify the climate impacts that you can help achieve, and for this, you can attract significant climate finance. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much, Marcus. Yes. So I think two important elements: the professionalization of the team that is responsible at the national level or in the institution to go further in exploring the partnership with the GCF and gathering the players at the national level. And the second thing is the use of this kind of national vertical funds for greening the processes and the funding and financing for local projects. Edna, you are the next one, and then Olympus, you also raised your hand. Edna, can you speak now?
Yes, thank you so very much, Carlos and Marcus. Very informative. We recently how shall I say, we restarted our accreditation process again. I'm from the Development Bank of Namibia, and I'm currently the Senior Manager for Environment and Social Sustainability. And so we are currently undergoing the accreditation panel process. Hopefully, our submission would be at the next board meeting. However, there's been just as you were going through the presentation, one of the key elements that stood out is that when it comes to the type of projects we can finance in the climate space, there are very large scale projects we want to finance as a national development bank. However, in the past, due to funding constraints and the type of funding we could raise because of the concessionality element to it, or perhaps the grant element, we're quite limited in the type of projects we could finance. However, we would like to finance large-scale climate-related projects because that's what the country requires. As you know, we are nominated and we work with the national, with the NDA. And as such, we've been requested to finance large projects. However, with accreditation, we might not be able to access the category that we would need to finance the large-scale projects. That's one of the challenge because of our track record. But our track record is a result of the type of finance we could raise because of the cost of capital. It was quite expensive in certain regards, so we couldn't necessarily finance large scale projects in the past. Now, how do you typically breach that barrier where it feels like it's the egg in front of the chicken? Because climate finance in our country, it's quite dry. There's a lot of need, would require very large scale investment. Thank you.
Thank you, Edna. Maybe we'll take the first round of questions or comments, and then we'll go back to you, Marcus. Olympus, you wanted to contribute to the conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alice. Marcus, my question has got to do with the process the GCF is currently undertaking with regard to revising the accreditation process. The first part of my question is just to have a feel of where that process is. When do we expect finalization and approval of that process? And the second part of the question is, how is it likely to impact those that are currently within the process of accreditation? And I guess hopefully for those who have not started, then they would understand the new requirements. But basically for those that are in the process of accreditation already, how do you see that impacting them? Thank you.
Thank you, Olympus. Good ones. Monsieur Gay, vous vouliez prendre la parole? Monsieur Gay, est-ce que vous nous entendez? Allez-y, vous pouvez, voilà. Allez-y. On ne vous entend pas. Ah oui, c'est bon, on vous entend, ça y est. Monsieur Gay? Okay, so
maybe let me answer the questions before I forget them.
Yes, go.
Okay, so first of all, Edna, good to meet you. I'm very happy that I saw that on the list. I'm working on a transaction with EIF, the Environmental Investment Fund in Namibia, and we're looking forward to have a larger scale partner in Namibia. So I think this is so as a National Development Bank, you have a track record on the sizes of projects. I think this is not it's not an exclusion criteria in going for the next category. I have a case in a country I'm assigned to whereby simply they forget to tick the boxes. So you choose the accreditation scope very wisely. You may not have, for example, an experience with granting, because as a national development bank, you typically are in the loan and lending business. But because of your procurement systems, you are perfectly capable to handle small and large scale grant disbursements. Even if you have let's say your annual portfolio is X, your systems that you have are, you can demonstrate that they are able to handle larger volumes. And so don't be afraid that, let's say your typical loan is 25 million. that doesn't mean you can't handle 50 million. And so don't be shy. Don't be shy to be aspirational in this accreditation scope. We're checking the systems behind it. As a national financial institutions, this is a non-exclusion criteria, the sort of track record in terms of sizes. On grants, the sort of projects that you want to propose, there's no limit on grant sizes, I think. So if that was a question, it can be, of course, working with the National Development Bank, we expect that this has also concessional reimbursable elements, but in all our projects, I don't think there's any project of GCF that doesn't have a grant portion. And if you don't have in the past been able to deliver large grants, you have the systems to do so. So this is something you have to demonstrate in your accreditation process. I hope that answers your question. If you had another nuance you wanted to check, please just write me or write the Namibia focal point. I'm sure she is in touch with you already.
Okay. Thank you so much. Very clear.
Yes. Then Olympus, you guys are the seniors here already on the continent. DBSA is the biggest client in a national development bank. So the new so I'm not this is not yet approved, the new accreditation framework, nor is this is clearly beyond my pay grade. This is something to be decided by the board. What I'm hearing is, and please take it with a grain of salt, what I'm saying is that we are very cognizant of the fact that accreditation is very difficult with GCF. And this is traditionally because of two things. One is that there was a lot of policy requirements in GCF because we're part of the UNFCCC mechanism, so that entities had to show a lot of policy compliance with GCF policies in terms of gender, ESS policy, and so on and so forth. The second is that there was a explicit, I wouldn't say promise, but it was explicit that once you're accredited with GCF, there's a direct route to programming. That means if you're accredited, you get projects. And these two things have led to a very selective choice of entities that are accredited. Also, there was in the beginning, a lot of entities have accredited to GCF, as a first movers, that are coming from a different sector, not from the financial sector. And so what I'm hearing about the new accreditation framework is that it will be much easier to get accredited. However, that doesn't mean automatically that you will be getting GCF resources. So then you have to compete for the best projects, meaning a lot of the requirements that were front-loaded to accreditation will be removed, and there will be more due diligence on the projects. And so whether or not this is approved, I don't know. Nobody knows. But I believe there is a understanding that we need a larger financial ecosystem working with GCF, and therefore the requirements for accreditation will be, I wouldn't say lowered, but more entities will be accredited faster. Now, what does this mean for the old timers? I don't think there is any negative effect. It is simply you would be able to demonstrate through your track record with GCF the solidity of your entity doing new programming. And so I don't think there will be any negative impact. And because we're also talking on projects, you know that once you're accredited, the real problem starts with project appraisal. And so I think that we're also reforming our project appraisal process to be much easier and faster. So I think overall, the promise of our director has has been more and faster access to GCF resources. So that trust that this will slowly but surely be implemented across the board, accreditation, appraisal, and so on and so forth. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much, Marcus.
Thank you, Marcus. Just before we go to FEICOM, the two last participants' questions. Monsieur Gay, je ne sais pas si vous pouvez si vous avez résolu le problème pour vous connecter et prendre la parole. If not, if Mr. Gay does not, can you try to speak now?
Oh, yeah. Please, I hope I'm the one you're speaking to.
Mr. Jian, right?
Yes.
Okay, go for it, because I think Mr. Guy has a problem with his mic. Please go.
Okay. Oh, mine is just to say that I work with the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. We've been on this journey for 3 to 4 years now. It's not been an easy road, especially when we've uploaded our first set of policies to the fund. We've had some form of response on some issues. We've just responded to about 2 months ago, but we haven't had any response yet. The challenge, I believe, maybe for most of the institutions that apply to the GCF is sometimes you would want somebody to talk to, somebody who will be able to explain issues to you better. Even though you have the focal person in the country, I think there are sometimes there are issues that even goes beyond them. Some explanations, if it's given by the GCF itself, will be very helpful, because I think there is some gap in terms of information and then knowledge gap from the local level. So I would want to recommend that maybe on this call, I think you've already mentioned that there is somebody who handles West Africa and then I think Central Africa also. If we could have his contact maybe after this call, then we can probably just schedule a meeting with the person so that we can have a smooth flow of our application, because a bit sometimes it gets tiring and it's a bit discouraging sometimes when you don't have anybody to talk to. So that is what I wanted to bring to your attention. Yes, I need a personal, maybe I'm just making this personal for the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund, because I think we play a very key role in Ghana. And once we get accredited, it will help the country a lot. Yes, thank you.
We hear you. We hear you very well. I think I saw the question of Mr. Gaye sent through the chat, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, we asked him. He's asking if they can go through a consulting firm rather than the ministry for the accreditation. But I think there is a confusion between the nomination and then the process of supporting technically the accreditation. But first, if you can comment on Mr. Jan's remarks, and then.
So, Mr. Jens, I think you are just lucky. We have just had a new system that we have country focal points now. I'm responsible for Ghana, so just write me on your accreditation, and I'll figure it out for you. I'll organize you a call with the accreditation team to go through those questions one by one.
Okay.
Check your country website. We have new focal points now. Part of the reason for the Africa team, the Africa regional office to be created is to be closer to our clients, to have a face and a name to all your questions, to be the front office for all client relationships in the countries. And then, because previously you were dealing with the accreditation team on this, and there were like 4 people for like 1,000 institutions. And this is going to change now, and it's going to be much more streamlined going forward. So I'm happy to discuss with you as early as next week. No, we are on Monday today already. It's holiday here. That's why I say next week. But come tomorrow morning, I'm happy to jump on a call with you to discuss where in the accreditation process you are and which questions you need answered. So that's one. And if you check, not everybody is from Ghana. That's why I'm assigned to Ghana and other countries. I don't have all the focal points in my head. Check the website. The emails are there. You have 3 people. Write them all with your questions. Say, hey, we applied 2 years ago. We've been meaning to speak to someone. let's organize a call. And they're happy to do it. And also, you have EcoBank already accredited in Ghana. Also reach out to them. I'm sure they can help you with a lot of this stuff as well. So now the next question was on the consultancy. So the accreditation process with the GCF is through an online system. So you have to upload the stuff yourself, back and forth. You have to have an institutional focal point to do that. However, we do have experience with entities that have hired a consultancy firm, and your guess is as good as mine. IFC has helped a lot of countries even to do this. To hire a consultancy firm to manage the accreditation process for you, prepare the document packages, Q&A documents for us, that is supporting you on calls with the GCF to explain the policy, especially if you're in Francophone Africa. We have very few Francophone speaking colleagues in the accreditation team to translate policies, Q&A from French to English. And sorry, this is just a reality of organizations, that things like this sometimes need expert support. We do have many of those cases whereby expert international consultants are supporting, especially national institutions, in their accreditation process, developing a dossier, for example. Oftentimes, the institutions seeking accreditation to us simply don't have the manpower or an office that is leading this accreditation. And so they're just in the process of setting up, for example, a climate finance desk or something like this. So having an institution investing a few, I don't know, a few $10,000 into getting expert consultancy to manage that accreditation process for you is a very wise investment, and has proven successful in the past. So I hope that answers your question. However, there is a sort of requirement for someone from your institution to be also part of that front of that phase interacting with us, because you have a login that you have to upload things and jump on a call with us. So there's a little bit of this dual track that you will have to manage. Over.
Thank you, Marcus. I think we'll close now, for now, the Q&As to open the floor for FEICOM. Thank you so much, Marcus, for your insights. Very useful. And anyway, if we have other questions from the membership, we'll send you the ones that we receive for you to give them to your colleagues in the different countries,
Yeah.
or if you can answer them. Thank you so much for joining us despite your holidays.
No, it's all right. It's all right. Just wanted to mention, while I'm only assigned to 6 countries, but feel free to write me and I'll be directing you to the appropriate colleague. So when you're from Nigeria, Ghana, Guinea, Equatorial Guinea, Djibouti, and Tunisia, please write to me. Otherwise, I'm happily directing you to other colleagues.
Thank you. And
thanks a lot. And you can do it. And we're looking forward to working with you.
Thank you so much, Marcus. Maintenant, j'aimerais donner la parole à Jean-Aloïse Biwolé, qui est le directeur de la coopération au FEICOM, la Banque des territoires du Cameroun, qui préside également l'Alliance des banques des territoires africaines. Jean-Aloïse, est-ce que vous nous entendez bien?
Oui, Carlos, bonjour.
Bonjour.
Vous m'entendez?
Oui, c'est parfait.
Voilà, très bien.
On vous laisse faire la présentation et on ouvrira ensuite avec une session de questions-réponses comme on vient de le faire avec Marcus. Merci beaucoup.
D'accord, merci de me passer la parole. Donc, effectivement, je vais vous parler plus précisément du processus d'accréditation du FEICOM au fonds d'adaptation, puisque le FEICOM s'est engagé en fait dans 2 processus, celui de l'accréditation au fonds d'adaptation et celui de l'accréditation également au fonds vert climat. qui a été suspendu en accord avec l'autorité nationale désignée, donc le ministère de l'Environnement du Cameroun, donc qui a estimé qu'il valait mieux que l'on s'engage d'abord sur une accréditation au fonds d'adaptation et puis après que l'on aille sur une procédure de fast-track avec le Fonds vert climat. Donc, voilà, pour dire qu'on est vraiment pleinement engagé sur ces questions d'accréditation qui sont également une activité assez lourde en termes de préparation des structures pour pouvoir être reconnu, accepté et pour pouvoir surtout soumissionner des projets, puisque l'objectif, c'est d'être éligible à la soumission de projets maintenant qui permettront de financer différentes activités au niveau local. Donc, ce qu'on peut dire, c'est que le FEICOM s'est très rapidement intéressé aux questions de lutte contre le changement climatique. Nous finançons donc des projets depuis plus de 50 ans maintenant, depuis 1974, le FEICOM a été créé et ces dernières années, la question du changement climatique est effectivement venue aux premières loges. D'où l'importance maintenant de trouver les voies et moyens pour pouvoir mobiliser des ressources. Donc, ce qui s'est fait effectivement à travers un certain nombre de partenaires, également une prise de connaissance de l'actualité mondiale concernant bien sûr tout ce qui est accord de Paris et des dispositifs de financement. Donc, on a parlé du Fonds vert climat, du Fonds d'adaptation, également la participation au COP, donc qui ont permis également d'avoir une meilleure compréhension des dispositifs mis en place et de la manière de les aborder. Donc, ce qu'on peut dire également, c'est que il y a en Afrique un ensemble d'aléas qui sont rencontrés. Bien sûr, sécheresse, incendies de forêt, vagues de chaleur, fortes précipitations, notamment au niveau du Cameroun, des inondations, de l'érosion marine, la montée des océans, la dégradation des écosystèmes et des terres. Donc, ce sont des situations auxquelles le Cameroun, notamment, est particulièrement confronté. Et ces manifestations, elles agissent sur la population, aussi bien en zone urbaine que rurale, d'où l'intérêt de pouvoir apporter des réponses, sachant également que nous avons des populations en Afrique qui sont particulièrement vulnérables du fait de la précarité socio-économique et de certaines difficultés d'accès aux services de base, que ce soit l'eau, que ce soit l'assainissement, la santé, l'éducation, etc. Donc, ce qu'on peut dire, c'est que nous avons des risques importants qui portent sur les catastrophes naturelles, sur la productivité agricole et la sécurité alimentaire, sur les aspects sanitaires et les infrastructures de base, notamment pour l'accès à l'eau potable et également à une énergie durable, et puis également la protection du milieu naturel et de la biodiversité. Donc, concernant la cible du FEICOM, c'est avant tout les collectivités territoriales décentralisées. Donc, au Cameroun, nous avons les régions et nous avons les communes. Les régions ont été mises en place assez récemment, mais les communes sont des clients avec lesquels nous travaillons depuis que le FEICOM existe pour pouvoir répondre à leurs besoins d'investissement. Et avec les collectivités, il s'agit déjà de pouvoir traduire les politiques climatiques globales en actions locales, c'est-à-dire prendre connaissance des agendas internationaux et d'un certain nombre de dispositifs, notamment ceux mis en place par l'État, puisqu'il y a des politiques sur le climat, sur la protection de l'environnement qui ont été mises en place par l'État camerounais. Et il s'agit non seulement de pouvoir s'aligner sur les agendas internationaux, mais également de pouvoir s'aligner sur les politiques nationales en la matière pour que les réponses soient vraiment adaptées à notre environnement. Donc, ce qu'on peut dire, c'est que le FEICOM a mis l'accent sur la recherche des financements, donc des ressources idoines. Et il s'agit effectivement de pouvoir répondre de manière directe aux besoins des communautés locales en orientant des flux de ressources correspondant aux besoins identifiés par les communautés cibles. Donc, il y a des ressources. Comment est-ce que on ramène ces ressources vers les besoins locaux? Et bien sûr, on passe par les collectivités territoriales décentralisées, notamment les municipalités ou les régions, donc qui sont la meilleure interface entre comment dire, cette offre au niveau international de ressources, de solutions, d'approches techniques, et puis les besoins des communautés à la base, donc qui font face aux difficultés réelles. Également, ce qui est important avec les CTD, c'est qu'elles ont un rôle d'interface important. Donc, on l'a dit avec ces communautés bénéficiaires, mais également avec les administrations, notamment les préfectures, le gouvernement à un plus haut niveau, et puis de l'autre côté, les bailleurs de fonds. Donc, le FEICOM, bien sûr, qui est le premier partenaire ou la première interface avec ces communes, mais également avec d'autres bailleurs qui pourraient venir derrière, dont nous avons des partenaires comme l'Union européenne, par exemple, qui intervient, avec laquelle nous travaillons de manière régulière, la coopération allemande, et puis également le secteur privé. Donc, concernant les engagements du FEICOM, on peut dire que nous avons une position qui est relativement stratégique. Donc, c'est un instrument public qui est dédié au financement du développement local, donc qui a fêté ses 50 ans d'existence en 2024. Donc, nous sommes certifiés ISO 9001 pour le système de management de la qualité et ISO 14001 pour le système de management environnemental. Et nous avons donc par la suite initié un processus d'accréditation au fonds d'adaptation en 2021. Donc, l'objectif, c'est d'améliorer les capacités de mobilisation des ressources qui sont destinées à financer le développement local et les projets locaux d'adaptation climatique au Cameroun, puisque nous travaillons essentiellement au Cameroun. Donc, en termes d'avancée, en 2024, nous avons mis en place nous avons mis à niveau l'ensemble de notre système documentaire et des outils de gouvernance pour nous conformer aux conditionnalités du fonds d'adaptation. Donc, notamment, il a fallu revoir le plan stratégique de performance, donc pour l'ajuster. Donc, nous avons un plan stratégique de performance 2025-2029 qui a été validé par le conseil d'administration. Nous avons également revu les manuels de gestion de cycle de projet, de suivi et évaluation et de gestion des plaintes environnementales et sociales. Donc, ce sont des outils très importants pour avoir les retours de terrain notamment et puis des différents acteurs. Nous avons également revu le manuel de passation des marchés et les politiques de lutte contre la fraude et le blanchiment des capitaux. Donc, ce sont également des aspects très importants relatifs à la transparence, puisque l'un des objectifs des partenaires ou des bailleurs, c'est de dire, nous vous apportons des ressources, est-ce que vous êtes en mesure de nous garantir la traçabilité des ressources que nous allons vous mettre à disposition et d'assurer également l'atteinte des objectifs en termes de réalisation des projets ou des investissements sur le terrain. Donc, ce sont deux aspects majeurs, en plus du fait qu'il faut intégrer des composantes de réponse aux atteintes, aux demandes des populations sur le terrain, notamment aux besoins des communautés. Et quand on parle des communautés, on parle effectivement des populations vulnérables, on parle du genre, qui est un des aspects majeurs. Le FEICOM a mis en place une sous-stratégie genre pour répondre à ces exigences. Et bien sûr, il y a les jeunes, il y a des personnes handicapées. Enfin, il faut intégrer, il faut avoir une approche inclusive qui nous permette effectivement de répondre véritablement aux besoins sur le terrain. Donc, il y a donc cette approche, cet accent particulier qui a été mis par le FEICOM dans le cadre de la revue de son système documentaire. Et cela va bien sûr de l'identification des besoins jusqu'au suivi et évaluation, en passant par l'implémentation des projets sur le terrain. Donc, concernant les étapes qui ont été franchies par le FEICOM, donc en 2021, le Fonds d'adaptation a validé la candidature du FEICOM à l'accréditation, qui a été soumise par le ministre camerounais en charge de l'environnement. Donc, il y a toujours l'intervention de l'État qui prend les engagements internationaux, mais qui est également l'interface, la première interface avec les fonds climatiques, notamment le Fonds d'adaptation, le Fonds vert climat. En 2022, le Fonds d'adaptation a octroyé un financement pour la mise à niveau de l'organisme, donc à travers ce qu'on appelle une readiness, donc c'est une activité de mise à niveau. avec l'appui du Centre de suivi écologique du Sénégal, donc le CSE, qui est également très expérimenté, qui est une des premières structures qui a été accréditée en Afrique et qui nous a accompagnés pour cette mise à niveau. Donc, suite à une première évaluation du fonctionnement du FEICOM, notamment à travers un gap assessment, l'ensemble du système documentaire a été mis à jour et complété avec des manuels et des documents de politique que je vous ai indiqués tout à l'heure. Donc, la soumission officielle de la demande d'accréditation a été effectuée en novembre 2024, après renseignement de l'ensemble des informations requises sur la plateforme du fonds d'adaptation. Donc, il y a une plateforme dédiée qui permet effectivement d'enregistrer l'ensemble des informations qui sont demandées. Donc, non seulement nous avons transmis près de 150 documents du système documentaire, mais il a fallu, sur un ensemble d'aspects, apporter les informations qui étaient demandées par le fonds d'adaptation pour assurer une bonne étude de notre dossier. Enfin, pour les perspectives 2025, c'est la suite du processus d'accréditation. Donc, nous attendons maintenant les retours du fonds d'adaptation. Il y a un certain nombre d'éléments complémentaires qui ont été demandés, qui ont été transmis. Et maintenant, nous sommes effectivement dans l'attente de savoir quelle sera la suite. Donc, au courant de cette année 2025, on l'espère au cours du trimestre en cours, en tout cas de cette première partie de l'année 2025. Donc, concernant les partenariats qui vont nous permettre également la construction d'un portefeuille de projets pour la phase ultérieure, notamment celle de la soumission de projets. Nous avons bien sûr le Fonds mondial de développement des villes, le FMDV, et le cadre de l'Alliance des banques des territoires, mais également de la plateforme Finance Your City et du réseau des institutions de financement de la décentralisation, le RIAFCO, ainsi que la recherche de partenariats stratégiques avec des bailleurs de fonds multilatéraux. Donc le FMDV nous a soutenu, appuyé depuis plusieurs années sur ces approches avec différents partenaires, sur le réseautage, en tout cas sur le renforcement de nos liens avec un ensemble de partenaires stratégiques. Donc on espère prochainement, nous avons pu rencontrer dernièrement DBSA pour pouvoir également voir dans quelle mesure est-ce que un partenariat pourrait être mis en place. Donc, nous avons également travaillé avec ICLEI Afrique dans le cadre d'un programme de renforcement des capacités des collectivités locales et qui a permis également un renforcement des capacités du personnel du FEICOM, ainsi que la mise en place d'outils de mobilisation des ressources financières et techniques. Nous avons travaillé également avec la Convention des maires pour l'Afrique subsaharienne, la COM-SSA, qui est soutenue par la coopération allemande, donc également pour le renforcement des capacités et la préparation d'un portefeuille de projets climatiques porté par les municipalités. Et puis, on va également indiquer la FAO qui nous accompagne dans le processus d'accréditation auprès du Fonds vert pour le climat. Donc, voilà ce qu'il en est un peu pour les partenariats. Je vais également indiquer que le FEICOM a mis en place, avec l'appui de l'Union européenne, donc il y a un autre partenaire important, un guichet climat. Donc, qui a complété les outils existants, dont nous avons un ensemble d'outils de financement pour les collectivités, mais celui-ci est plus spécifique pour les questions de lutte contre le changement climatique. Donc, il vise à mobiliser des ressources auprès de plusieurs partenaires financiers pour la réalisation de projets avec une contrepartie communale à hauteur de 15% des coûts de réalisation. Donc, il y a toujours au FEICOM ce souci que les collectivités puissent également s'impliquer financièrement dans les projets qui sont financés. Et bien sûr, là, sur les questions qui sont liées à l'adaptation, notamment avec le fonds d'adaptation, on est plus sur des approches de dons, mais cela n'empêche pas qu'il y ait une implication des communes dans les financements qui seront mobilisés. Donc, les financements du guichet climat sont destinés à la réalisation de projets qui sont soumis directement par les CTD au FEICOM, mais ces projets peuvent être également préparés dans le cadre d'appels à projets thématiques. Donc, nous avons 2 appels à projets qui ont été effectués ces dernières semaines, notamment un qui concerne la reforestation et un autre sur les inondations, donc qui sont deux problèmes importants auxquels les collectivités sont confrontées. Donc, le guichet climat pourra nous permettre également d'envisager le développement à terme de différents outils de financement de l'adaptation et de l'atténuation. Donc, là également, on sait qu'il peut y avoir un ensemble d'outils beaucoup plus spécialisés. Ça peut être, comment dire, des obligations, ça peut être, en tout cas, ce sont autant de choses qui nécessitent une étude préalable et la mise en place d'instruments adéquats avec les partenaires adéquats. Mais la question des assurances également est un point sur lequel nous réfléchissons, assurance climat, mais tout ça effectivement demande d'avoir des partenaires solides et également une préparation solide pour pouvoir déployer de tels moyens qui doivent, pour l'essentiel, permettre aux communes d'améliorer leur accès aux financements internationaux, mais également de se prémunir face aux problèmes de changement climatique en renforçant leur résilience. Alors, parmi les thématiques des projets qui sont en préparation ou sur lesquels nous réfléchissons, donc il y a bien sûr la réforestation et la lutte contre la dégradation des terres en zone rurale, le verdissement, la lutte contre les îlots de chaleur en zone urbaine, donc les parcs, jardins, etc. Les pollutions atmosphériques également qui posent beaucoup de problèmes en ville. La prévention des risques liés à la sécurité alimentaire. Donc, on a parlé de l'agriculture, de l'élevage. On a l'accès à l'eau avec les infrastructures d'exor et de stockage, la préservation des ressources, l'irrigation. Et également l'utilisation des énergies renouvelables. Donc, le FEICOM là, est très fréquemment intervenu dans ce domaine, comme c'est le cas également pour l'eau. Dans le domaine des énergies renouvelables avec de l'électrification, notamment dans les zones hors réseau, et puis de l'éclairage public, solaire, etc. Nous avons également la question de la gestion et du recyclage des déchets et le développement de l'économie circulaire. L'assainissement pluvial contre les inondations en zone urbaine, mais ça peut être également dans d'autres secteurs. La construction durable et la réduction de l'empreinte écologique des bâtiments et des infrastructures. Et puis, le renforcement des outils de planification. Donc, tout ce qui est plan d'action. Donc, nous avons travaillé dessus avec la Convention des maires pour l'Afrique subsaharienne. Les plans d'occupation des sols, notamment pour la gestion des risques de catastrophes. Donc, qui sont autant de types de projets ou de profils de projets qui pourraient être soumis par les communes pour pouvoir faire face à à ces changements climatiques. Donc, je vais terminer sur les perspectives. Donc, c'est déjà de permettre aux CTD camerounaises de bénéficier de ressources financières alternatives pour améliorer la résilience des communautés face aux effets des changements climatiques. Également, de favoriser un développement local inclusif et durable qui implique les communautés cibles, le genre et les populations vulnérables. Donc, ce sont des points vraiment majeurs des ajustements qui ont été faits dans notre système documentaire pour être en cohérence avec les bailleurs, notamment avec le fonds d'adaptation. Et je pense que le fonds vert également fonctionne sur les mêmes principes. Nous avons ensuite le renforcement du rôle d'intermédiation des institutions de financement des collectivités territoriales décentralisées afin d'améliorer leur dispositif de captation des ressources financières disponibles auprès des bailleurs de fonds climatiques. Donc, c'est là que le rôle du FEICOM est majeur, c'est celui d'assurer cette intermédiation, de pouvoir rassurer les bailleurs de fonds sur la manière dont les ressources qui vont être transférées vont être gérées et vont permettre effectivement d'atteindre les objectifs, les objectifs qui ont été fixés au départ. Et je pense que c'est également sur ce point-là que le FMDV a une action majeure de nous permettre, au niveau du FEICOM, de pouvoir atteindre un niveau de respect, disons, des exigences de ses partenaires, de pouvoir mobiliser les garanties adéquates et puis à travers comment dire, notre système documentaire, mais également les outils opérationnels qui sont mis en place, de pouvoir vraiment nous mettre à niveau aux standards internationaux, puisqu'il s'agit de standards internationaux. Enfin, il s'agit de favoriser le réseautage, les échanges de bonnes pratiques, les actions de plaidoyer et les cadres de partenariat entre les banques subnationales de financement de la décentralisation et les bailleurs de fonds bilatéraux, multilatéraux, mais également le secteur privé. Je pense qu'également ce sont des points sur lesquels le FMDV nous soutient déjà depuis très longtemps. Donc, sur ce, je pense que j'ai fait l'essentiel donc de cette présentation, dont je voudrais encore remercier également le FMDV de nous avoir associés à ce webinaire, notamment le directeur général en particulier vous remercie pour tout ce qui est fait pour nous permettre effectivement de pouvoir partager ces meilleures pratiques et pouvoir les mettre en place, et puis de pouvoir également élargir notre capacité d'intervention pour répondre aux besoins des populations sur le terrain. Donc, je vous remercie donc de votre bien aimable attention.
Merci beaucoup, Jean-Aloïse, c'était très clair. Je voudrais ouvrir maintenant les questions-réponses, si on en a, et peut-être commencer, Jean-Aloïse, peut-être par une question assez simple, mais dans le processus d'accréditation vers le fonds d'adaptation, comme vous l'avez dit, l'idée est de passer aussi à travers tout le processus du fonds d'adaptation pour s'engager ensuite dans une accréditation rapide vers le GCF, vers le fonds vert. Mais qu'est-ce qui vous a paru à ce stade, au stade d'échange avec les équipes du fonds d'adaptation, le plus complexe à mettre en œuvre de votre côté? Évidemment, il y a toute la question de la mise aux normes des processus internes qu'on vous a demandé, toute la documentation, etc. Mais peut-être est-ce qu'il y a quelque chose de plus spécifique qui vous a posé problème ou qui a été plus complexe à résoudre et sur laquelle vous appelez peut-être les banques des territoires qui sont ici présentes à faire attention ou à mieux se préparer en amont par rapport à ce processus? Est-ce qu'il y a un élément comme ça qui est un peu voilà, plus complexe et qu'il faut anticiper davantage?
Alors, disons, ce que je peux dire à ce niveau, c'est que le FEICOM s'est relativement bien préparé depuis quelques années. En fait, on n'avait pas cet objectif d'aller vers les fonds climatiques, mais dans les milieux, fin des années 2000, de pouvoir optimiser nos processus et procédures. Donc, ça a été un travail très important qui nous a permis d'aller vers une certification ISO. Et qui nous a permis véritablement de poser les bases en termes de système documentaire. Donc ça, c'est un élément vraiment essentiel. Entre-temps, nous avons travaillé également beaucoup, mais là, de longue date, sur nos outils de financement, parce qu'il faut pouvoir optimiser les solutions financières qu'on apporte à cette cible très particulière que sont les collectivités territoriales décentralisées. Bien sûr, il y a un mix entre des ressources qui viennent de l'État central, notamment de la fiscalité, et puis d'autres ressources qui sont remboursables, puisque dans les financements qui sont apportés par le FEICOM, il y a, selon le type de projet, notamment les projets générateurs de revenus, des parts remboursables pour lesquelles nous mettons en place avec les communes comment dire, des échéanciers pour le remboursement avec des retenues à la source, puisque le FEICOM assure également la redistribution des ressources financières des CTD. Et donc, à ce moment, comment dire, on peut dire qu'on était relativement bien préparé pour pouvoir aller vers ces financements climatiques. Mais cela s'est fait de manière progressive. C'est d'abord nous armer sur les procédures et les processus, c'est vraiment très important. Le développement de nos outils de financement. Et puis après, nous sommes allés sur une certification ISO 14001 qui nous a permis de commencer à ouvrir vraiment la question sur tout ce qui était protection de l'environnement dans nos projets. Alors, on peut dire que tous les financements apportés par le FEICOM suivent comment dire, le principe préalable des études d'impact environnemental, mais la question c'était d'aller plus loin, c'est-à-dire au-delà de la prise en compte de l'environnement dans nos projets, comment aller vers d'autres problématiques, notamment celle de la lutte contre le changement climatique, en mettant en place des dispositifs spécifiques. Et l'accompagnement avec le CSE, le Centre de suivi écologique du Sénégal, nous a permis d'une part de caler nos processus et procédures par rapport aux exigences spécifiques aux questions de climat, d'une part, et de l'autre, également d'optimiser sur le plan financier, en prenant en compte notamment ces questions qui concernent la lutte contre la fraude, comment est-ce qu'on l'optimise, quelles sont les exigences, comment assurer la traçabilité de ces ressources, et puis comment répondre également à des questions un peu qui peuvent paraître un peu particulières, celle de la lutte contre le blanchiment et celle de la lutte également antiterroriste que je n'ai pas relevée, mais qui est un élément important quand on utilise, enfin quand on reçoit des ressources de bailleurs de fonds, de pouvoir garantir que ces ressources ou une partie de ces ressources n'atterriront pas dans des groupes qui soutiennent des mouvements terroristes ou qui font du recyclage de ressources, notamment au niveau des prestataires, puisque c'est souvent les prestataires qui sont retenus. Donc, j'ai parlé de la question des marchés publics. Les prestataires qui sont retenus peuvent être effectivement dans des circuits pour lesquels les bailleurs ne veulent pas, auxquels les bailleurs ne veulent pas être mêlés, donc toujours pour des questions de réputation. Donc, cela nous a permis effectivement d'aborder toutes ces questions. On imagine qu'avec le Fonds vert climat, on passera à une difficulté supplémentaire, puisque autant sur le Fonds d'adaptation, l'essentiel des ressources se fait en dons, et autant sur le Fonds vert climat, il y a des compartiments où il y a des exigences de remboursement de crédit, c'est qu'il y a des apports de financement, mais qui sont remboursables. Et là, sûrement, il faudra mettre en place des dispositifs un peu plus pointus sur ces aspects-là. Donc, voilà ce que je peux dire déjà.
Merci beaucoup. Alors, il y a une question de M. Gay de l'ADM. Comment le FEICOM assure-t-il la garantie du remboursement des ressources prêtées aux collectivités territoriales? Alors, je pense que ce n'est pas tout à fait lié à la conversation, mais ça peut être un élément intéressant qui, de toute façon, servira plus tard quand vous aurez les financements climat liés au fonds d'adaptation. Et pour Mirana du Fonds pour le développement local de Madagascar, quelles sont les alternatives pour accéder aux différents types de financement climat lorsque le pays ne dispose pas encore d'entités accréditées? Donc, Jean-Aloïse, si vous voulez bien répondre à M. Gay, moi je répondrai à Mirana sur ce point-là, et puis on pourra passer à la présentation de DBSA. Merci.
D'accord. Donc, oui, effectivement, sur la deuxième question, j'aurais du mal à répondre, mais pour la question de M. Gay, le FEICOM, donc, dans ses statuts, disons, dans ses missions, est chargé d'assurer le reversement des ressources centralisées par l'État, donc de la fiscalité locale qui est centralisée par l'État, donc les ressources qui proviennent de la douane, des impôts, etc., qui sont centralisées par l'État et qui font l'objet d'une répartition trimestrielle par le biais de la Banque centrale, donc la Banque des États de l'Afrique centrale. Donc, ces ressources transitent par le FEICOM qui assure une redistribution sous l'encadrement du ministère de tutelle, notamment le ministère de la décentralisation et le ministère des Finances, qui sont ces deux tutelles. Donc, il y a une redistribution par un système de péréquation des ressources centralisées par l'État à toutes les communes. Donc, il y a une clé de répartition qui est calé sur la population, mais également sur un montant minimal, un montant plancher qui permet à toutes les communes de disposer de ressources pour assurer leur fonctionnement courant. Donc à ce moment-là, le FEICOM, au moment où il effectue la redistribution de ces ressources, peut faire des ponctions, notamment des retenues sur les crédits ou sur les échéances des crédits qui ont été faites à différentes communes. Donc, les projets qui ont obtenu des financements, notamment sur les parts en crédit remboursables, les retenues sont opérées donc de manière trimestrielle et permettent d'assurer quasiment un risque zéro au FEICOM en termes de remboursement. Bien sûr, une commune qui rencontre des difficultés, après un échange, on peut passer à un rééchelonnement des financements, donc qui permet à cette commune de souffler, en tout cas de pouvoir rembourser à son rythme Mais tout ça est fait sur la base de contrats, de conventions avec les communes. Et c'est quelque chose qui fonctionne plutôt bien puisqu'on a beaucoup de pays en fait, africains qui sont, en fait, de délégations qui sont venues nous rencontrer pour voir un peu comment ce système fonctionne. Et je dis, ça fait, disons, plus d'une vingtaine d'années que ce dispositif fonctionne, donc presque la moitié de la vie effective du FEICOM, où il y a eu des difficultés à un moment pour se financer. Et cette solution a été trouvée, elle a été mise en place progressivement et elle permet vraiment d'assurer un financement des projets des communes et même un fonctionnement des communes qui est exemplaire. Donc
Merci
voilà ce que
beaucoup.
je peux vous dire.
Oui, merci, c'est très clair. On fera de toute façon également un point sur la question des garanties, notamment parce que vous savez que l'Agence française de développement et l'Agence des Nations Unies, UNCDF, ont développé avec le soutien de l'Union européenne 2 systèmes de garantie vers les collectivités et vers les banques des territoires. Et notamment, UNCDF a lancé un appel aux banques nationales et infranationales de développement qui souhaitent faire partie du pool des acteurs pour lesquels ils peuvent apporter des garanties. On vous passera le lien et on peut organiser des calls bilatéraux avec les institutions qui souhaitent avoir une discussion plus étroite avec UNCDF. On en a parlé avec eux, mais on fera de toute façon une réunion pour qu'ils puissent exposer quelle est la dynamique sur laquelle ils se trouvent avec les fonds européens, le type de projet qu'ils souhaitent promouvoir, etc. Donc ça, sur la question des garanties, on le sait, c'est un élément important pour fluidifier le financement des projets. Pour répondre à la question sur les alternatives, tant que vous n'avez pas d'organisation accréditée au niveau national, et c'est assez simple, hein, c'est-à-dire que vous devez passer par des intermédiaires. Ces intermédiaires, ce sont des organisations qui sont déjà accréditées au fond, qui soit ont des appels à projets, à manifestation d'intérêt qui sont lancés régulièrement, soit qui ont des bureaux dans vos pays. Alors, je parle de l'Agence française de développement, de certaines banques commerciales, de certaines agences des Nations Unies, comme le Programme des Nations Unies pour le développement, et qui, eux, à travers la collaboration que vous pouvez avoir avec eux, en leur présentant un projet qui soit clairement cadré sous le volet climat, peuvent se faire intermédiaires pour obtenir les fonds dont vous avez besoin, puisque les niveaux d'accréditation des différents organismes peuvent leur permettre d'avoir des fonds de subvention ou des fonds qui sont liés à de l'investissement plus ou moins important en fonction du type de projet. Donc, il faut aller sur le site des différents fonds internationaux que vous ciblez, c'est-à-dire soit le fonds d'adaptation, soit le fonds pour l'environnement mondial, soit le fonds vert pour le climat, et vous avez la liste des entités qui sont accréditées. Et dans cette liste, vérifiez celles qui ont un bureau au niveau national et que vous pouvez les contacter justement pour d'y commencer à discuter avec eux, pour avoir cette connexion avec les fonds internationaux, voir quels sont les secteurs sur lesquels aujourd'hui eux entendent développer des projets au niveau de votre pays et essayer de les convaincre de travailler avec vous sur ce volet-là. Je vais laisser la parole maintenant à DBSA, donc Olympus Manthata, qui est chef de la division finance, climat et environnement, et Mohamed Sayed, qui est spécialiste au sein de la division. Olympus, if you want to take the floor first, I think, and then Mohamed will do the presentation. The floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Carlos. I won't waste time. I'll just pass on directly to Muhammad to proceed with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Carlos, I'm just mindful of time. Can you just give me how much time do I have so I can just make sure
We'll stick on the time you need. Don't worry, because it's a close group. You know, we are in the conversation, so don't worry about the time. I think it's important that you deliver the presentation as fully as you imagined, because I think it's the core element of the webinar. So don't worry about the time.
Thank you so much. But I'll try and obviously, be brief as well. So I think my presentation would cover two aspects. I think the first part would be looking more at, DBSA's, I guess, some key lessons learned around accreditation, our accreditation experience, and maybe just sharing some suggestions or advice, noting that it's based, of course, on the current accreditation process. And as we heard earlier, there is a process of revising the accreditation process within GCF. So what I'll be sharing now is, of course, lessons learned based on the existing requirements and processes of GCF. And then the second part of the presentation would talk a bit about our approach to accessing funds from GCF. As we noted in some of the earlier presentations, getting accredited is one thing. Accessing the funds, is a completely different experience. And we would like to just share, our approach as DBSA in terms of what we believe, makes more sense in terms of an approach. It may not be for all entities, but at least it's something, worth perhaps looking at as well. So I think before going into accreditation lessons, I think it's important just to understand where we come from as a development finance institution operating in sub-Saharan Africa. I think some of you are aware of DBSA, but for those of you who are not, in summary, DBSA is a infrastructure finance institution. We are based in South Africa, but our operations, we do have a mandate to operate in sub-Saharan Africa and support both social infrastructure as well as key economic infrastructure as well, such as energy, transport, ICT, water, of course. And, our clients include state-owned entities. We have local municipalities, predominantly in South Africa, private sector as well, and national and provincial government departments. So our key focus is ensuring that we support infrastructure in a sustainable manner. And from that perspective, and to ensure sustainability, climate change is, of course, an important factor. And that's where, accessing climate finance becomes quite key. I think it's also worth noting that our involvement covers the entire project value chain. So we do support infrastructure projects at the planning stage as well, especially with regards to municipal infrastructure plans in South Africa. We do a lot of work around preparation of projects, and we have a dedicated unit and team that focuses on preparation funding. And then, of course, the bulk of our focus is on the actual finance, in the form of various types of, using various financial instruments. And of course, the last part of project value chain is, of course, building and maintenance. So jumping straight into it, we started our accreditation journey, I think, back in 2015-16. Initially, we applied for accreditation with the GEF, and then subsequent to receiving accreditation with the GEF, we applied for accreditation with the Green Climate Fund, which was a slightly easier process in the sense that we went through a fast-tracking process of accreditation, where a lot of the conditions that were applicable for GEF were waived, well, not waived, but at least, we didn't have to go through the same process in terms of submitting information that was already evaluated through the GEF accreditation. Nonetheless, there are, key aspects to share, with institutions around the accreditation journey. But I think the important thing to note is, before we applied for accreditation, the question we asked ourselves is, what is the relevance of GCF to the business of DBSA, which is infrastructure finance, and how can GCF support our strategic objectives of supporting sustainable infrastructure in this particular case? So I think that there are a couple of ways of looking at it as a DFI. I think for us, we saw GCF as an important financing mechanism to assist us in mobilizing finance at scale. And in that way, designing and implementing strategic programs. And I'll talk a bit about that approach a bit later when I very briefly mention some of the examples that we've developed with GCF support and subsequently currently implementing with GCF. But we believe that, the quantum of funds that you can mobilize, from GCF and attracting other sources of funding can certainly help you to develop large-scale initiatives or programs, both in terms of supporting a low-carbon trajectory, but also climate resilience. It does help your institution to green your own portfolio. There's a lot of talk about, institutions trying to have net zero commitments as an example. And that means ensuring that your portfolio move towards that particular trajectory. And, GCF could be a mechanism of supporting that particular goal. So ultimately, it could be a good starting point for mainstreaming climate finance within your institution. And we've certainly seen that happen within our context as DBSA. Marcus, in the previous presentation, spoke about, some of the instruments and the concessional finance that GCF offers. And we believe, there are a number of course, financial advantages of accessing GCF funds, which you can then, use for blending purposes. And you'll notice that a lot of the examples that we have currently in our portfolio are very much blended finance instruments. And you can use the GCF funding in a way where you can offer, various types of credit enhancement, as an example, to beneficiaries. So just maybe going through just a few insights around our accreditation journey. As I mentioned before, we did go through a fast track process with GCF, but I think having assisted a number of institutions in Africa around accreditation and sharing some advice around the approach. And I think ultimately the key thing is to look at fit for purpose accreditation, to try and ensure where possible, you align your strategic objectives as institution with the accreditation, the type of accreditation you are seeking with GCF, both in terms of, the size of projects you wish to be accredited for. Noting that Marcus did mention a very important point that, don't be shy to have aspirations. So currently you may not have a portfolio of let's say, large projects, but you wish to apply for accreditation that exceeds your current portfolio. So provided that you do have the right processes in place, which GCF can evaluate, just to give them comfort that, you are in a position to implement these larger projects, by all means, that's something you can consider. But ultimately, you also want to ensure that you can also demonstrate some sort of track record in terms of, the type of projects that you have experience in implementing. So, the accreditation with regards to, for example, the environmental risk category that you want to be accredited towards, the requirements are, of course, a lot more complex and stringent when it comes to, for example, category A projects. So if you do have, for example, a history of supporting predominantly category B projects, you need to make sure that you do have the processes in place, to manage category A projects, if indeed that's the categorization you are seeking accreditation for. So that's just some of the considerations you may need to look at before applying for accreditation and to see, if it's fit for purpose. I think without going into detail around the specific aspects that would be looked at through accreditation, and I think a number of entities on the call might be at various stages of accreditation. So I think you are well aware of, some of the basic fiduciary standards that would be looked at. And I think in most cases, and from our experience, we've seen that a lot of financial institutions don't necessarily have a lot of issues around the basic fiduciary standards. I think where a lot of gaps, may appear around more the specialized fiduciary standards, especially in terms of demonstrating track record with respect to, using and deploying various types of financial instruments. So I think that's an aspect that, normally, you would want to see whether you have enough track record to, to justify, experience in managing projects and managing different types of instruments. Another key aspect where we've seen a lot of entities perhaps, needed to enhance their institutional policies, especially with regards to gender-related policies, noting that GCF have a very strong emphasis on gender mainstreaming, and we have seen that a lot of entities may not have policies in place at all. So they have to start either from scratch, or they do have some policies, but it's not necessarily, complete enough to, to meet the requirements for GCF accreditation. So this is an area where we've seen a lot of entities, playing, or at least focusing a lot on enhancing their gender policies. I've already mentioned the issue around, environmental categories, and environmental social safeguards are obviously quite key. And some of the safeguards that you may already have in place will need to be aligned with, with the GCF requirements. We have seen in the past that most financial institutions who are already aligned with IFC standards, as an example, it's not a major refinement that's required in order to meet the GCF requirements, but otherwise there are a number of standards and safeguards that you need to ensure is aligned to GCF requirements. So again, this is an area where we believe there could be a lot of institutions that face a lot of gaps, or at least where more support is required, but it may not be the case for for other institutions. So I think the main thing to emphasize with regards to accreditation is just ensuring that before starting the accreditation process, as Marcus pointed out, there is a nomination from the NDA. I think it's important to also ensure that you obviously do your needs analysis in terms of understanding where you are before starting the journey. I think you don't want to start without ensuring that you believe there is some level of comfort that you can go through the phase 1 of the accreditation process, and hopefully you do have a lot of the key elements that would be looked at for phase 2 of the accreditation. We believe that having leadership support within your own organization is quite key. And the reason for that is the level of detailed information required to support your accreditation application means that you need to have buy-in from everyone within the organization, all the different units within the organization. And if there isn't high level support or buy-in, it's very difficult to get that information from the different units within your organization. So I think that's just something to also consider. We already highlighted the fact that try and align the accreditation category with your own mandate where possible, in terms of what you can demonstrate as a track record, but also in terms of your sectors, your geographical kind of focus as well, and the instruments that you have a track record in deploying. But again, if you do have ambitions to expand your existing mandate and expand your existing financial instruments, there's no reason not to seek accreditation beyond what you currently offer. But again, it's important to emphasize, and as pointed out previously by Marcus, you need to then make sure that you have strong evidence to demonstrate that the processes that you have put in place you can give comfort that to GCF that you will be in a position to deploy those type of instruments and, of course, manage the projects of a larger size compared to what you perhaps are currently managing. So I think this slide just looks at some of the key lessons that we've come across through our accreditation journey. I think the bottom line is it is a significant undertaking. It's not a quick and easy process. In some cases it can be quite time consuming, and we've heard from some of the entities in this call. They've been in this process for two years, some 3 years, some even longer, and based on our engagements with some of the entities to date, we believe that it's important to just maintain ongoing dialogue with the Secretariat. And I think it was good to hear from Marcus that with the revised organizational structure of GCF, and now that they have these regional a regional unit where you have dedicated individuals that you can call upon beyond the accreditation team, I think that's a good focal point to have in mind, and just to get a status update, or at least facilitate the engagements with the accreditation team if you are struggling with getting feedback from the accreditation team with regards to your application. We do believe that whilst the accreditation process can be quite long and perhaps frustrating at times, there are benefits at the end of the day, even if you ultimately you want to be accredited, but you may find that after a while you may not have the bandwidth to continue with the accreditation process. It doesn't mean that the work that has gone into preparing the submission, at least you've identified where the gaps are in your institution. There are certain things that you may have needed to enhance in any case, whether you seek accreditation to GCF or not. So we believe that, that in itself, can be of benefit, especially when it comes to embedding climate elements in what you're doing as an organization, and ensuring your safeguards, as an example, are aligned to that. But also gender policies, which is quite key. Regardless of whether you're accessing climate finance, gender mainstreaming is becoming a important element for a lot of institutions, especially DFIs. I already mentioned the need for doing the gap analysis. That's already part of the process for your phase 1 application. But, it's important that even if before, submitting the application, just to have a high level sense of, what the key requirements are for accreditation. And based on that, just do your own analysis of where you believe you are in terms of, meeting those requirements. I think it's also important to have a dedicated team. At minimum, one dedicated individual is, may suffice. But more often than not, you may need, more than one person to assist you with, with the process, depending on the timelines that you may have in mind for accreditation. I also believe that, when you submit your application, especially for the phase 2 of the submission, very often you'll need to have a narrative to justify certain statements that you are making. So there's a lot of, it's a drop-down menu where you answer questions based on choosing various options. But a lot of these answers require justification and supporting documents and evidence. So where possible, providing that track record, which may include, demonstrating some portfolio of projects which are climate related, as an example, or demonstrating evidence, where ESG safeguards have been applied, or practices have been applied. I think all of that is quite key. So where possible, providing that evidence is important. That will just delay, or at least prevent, a lot of to and fro between GCF and yourselves, especially during phase 2 of the submission. I think I already mentioned the issue around just doing your stage 1 checklist, which is part of what needs to be done. I already mentioned the importance of ensuring that your ESG safeguards, a lot of emphasis is placed on that. So just doing an analysis with your ESG team, if you do have a team that's overseeing the safeguards, just ensuring that upfront, this is something that you believe, would suffice, because that's where we often find a lot of gaps. Some of the challenges that we've come across, and these are challenges that we've also come across, I guess, during our accreditation, is what I mentioned before. Just ensuring that you have access to documents can be a bit challenging, especially information that may be regarded as sensitive. So you may need to engage with various colleagues within your institution, and they may be reluctant to provide that information. So I think communication is quite key, just ensuring that they understand the process before you start accreditation, and understanding that this is the level of information that they may require, but it will be held confidential. So I think that comfort needs to be provided as well. So there would be concerns around what one can disclose, but the reality is for accreditation, there's a lot of information that would be required, and portfolio information, sensitive information can be removed. So it doesn't mean that you need to disclose everything. So if there's certain information which you believe are sensitive, it just means it's a lot more work to sift through which information would be regarded as sensitive. So these are just some of the challenges that we faced, and I believe some other entities might also face. And as I said, communication is quite key, and making sure that you have buy-in from across the whole institution to address some of these challenges. So key consideration to solve some of these issues is ensuring that you have capacity, firstly, within your institution to not only undertake the accreditation process, but then, of course, capacity to actually then access the funds from GCF, because that alone also requires dedicated resources and teams in terms of ensuring that you can build a robust portfolio of GCF projects. Communication, as I mentioned, is quite key. I think the other important point to note is when you start your accreditation journey, it's important to agree with GCF where possible on some sort of timeline as to which particular board meeting you wish to target for accreditation. I think it's always good to have that agreement with GCF, so you're both working on the same timeframes. Of course, you have to be realistic in terms of what's possible, and in that way, if you do struggle with the communication channels, and also when you're engaging with the relevant focal point in your particular region, you're all working on that specific timelines, and hopefully you can then push to get responses in order to ensure that things are not delayed beyond the time frame that you both kind of agreed to. So that's something worth considering. I think in the last maybe few minutes of my presentation, I would like to just go through the next part of the presentation, which is more around post-accreditation. And once you've got the go-ahead to be to start accessing funds, that's not the be-all and end-all of actually getting the finance from GCF. We often find that there are entities which are accredited, and back in 2017 or even earlier, and some of them may not have projects yet that have been approved by GCF, and there could be various reasons for that. And we would just want to share at least our approach as a DFI. Again, this may not be the approach which may, be appropriate for all institutions, but it's an approach which we believe, made sense in our specific context as a DFI that operates within the, the sub-Saharan African region. So we've predominantly used our accreditation since, I guess, 2016, 17 onwards, to establish blended finance programs or facilities to support climate mitigation and adaptation in the region. And that's kind of just to give you a summary of what we've done, what we've tried to do with GCF funds to date. And GCF is, of course, not the only mechanism that we've tapped into over the last few years, but it's certainly the largest, climate finance mechanism out there globally, and it's certainly an important part of what we're trying to do as GCF in terms of mobilizing various sources of climate finance. So, as an example, we started our journey in terms of having a dedicated climate fund or green fund back in 2012. That was a stepping stone for us to then apply for accreditation to the GEF, as I mentioned before, and that allowed us to then seek accreditation to the GCF through the fast track process. So to date, we've built a fairly good portfolio with under GEF, and we started building a large portfolio as well within GCF. But as you'll see, it may not be the number of initiatives, but it's more the size of those initiatives. And the reason for that is these are all programs or facilities and not individual projects. And I'll go into that in the next few slides. We also try to use GCF in a complementary manner where we can complement climate finance, mitigation, adaptation finance with other sources of green finance, including what we can mobilize from the GEF, which is more focused on broader environmental benefits and nature-based type of solutions. So we believe that with GEF and GCF and the DBSA's focus on infrastructure, we can support low carbon, climate resilient infrastructure with GCF, and then use GEF to ensure that infrastructure is also nature positive. So that's where we see strong linkages between the two, even though GEF can also most certainly support climate initiatives. But we believe, we can use the GEF resources more on the policy side, transforming and influencing policy within the region in terms of supporting the low carbon, climate resilient agenda. But in terms of looking at projects at scale, we believe, the GCF funds can be extremely useful. So I'll end off by just going through just a few examples, just to give you a flavor of some of the initiatives we've developed, which again is very much aligned with our mandate as an infrastructure development institution in the region. But it doesn't mean that we are restricted to just looking at those sectors which are aligned to DBSA, but it does help you, at least help us as an institution, to co-fund with GCF. If there's no alignment, it's very difficult for us then to co-fund with GCF, which is quite key as well in order to increase your chances of getting funding from the GCF. So as I mentioned before, to a large extent, we've largely used GCF resources to design various types of programs or facilities, which are then used to support sub-projects. I think the reason for that, there's a couple of reasons. One is we realized quite early on that the amount of resources required to develop proposals for approval would be the same regardless of whether it's a small project that you're submitting or a larger project. Yes, the larger one might be more complex. It may take a longer time to develop, but ultimately you would still need the same level of resources and processes to take that to approval stage. So for us, we felt that it didn't make a lot of sense to go to GCF for individual projects, but rather explore the possibility of designing programs across key areas and then have a high-level approval at a program level. And the approval of the sub-projects relies on our own processes as an institution, which of course has now been vetted by GCF through the accreditation process. Yes, there may still be additional comfort that you need to give to GCF around the selection of those sub-projects, in terms of ensuring that it's still aligned with the GCF mandate, et cetera, But ultimately, once all of that has been agreed with GCF, the process of approving the sub-projects is much more quicker. So to date, we've developed 3 programs which have been approved by GCF. One is a climate finance facility, which I'll briefly mention. There's, of course, a program that we've developed shortly thereafter, focusing more on renewable energy in South Africa. And then more recently, the last few years, we developed a program on the adaptation side, focusing on water resilience, a water reuse program, which at the time was the largest investment by GCF towards an adaptation initiative. And then there's been a number of initiatives that we've also been designing over the last few years that we're busy advancing with GCF, even though it's been a number of years now that we've been developing these programs. But we hope to advance some of these programs either with GCF or other sources of funding, where we've managed to secure some funding from GCF through project preparation funding, or what they call PPF support. And we believe that's an important mechanism as well to assist in the development of projects and proposals. So I'll just briefly talk about that as well in the last few minutes that I have. So this is just a summary of the portfolio of the 3 programs that are currently being implemented with GCF support. The largest one currently is the water reuse program, where we managed to mobilize around $235 million, which includes a 35 million grant, where we supporting sub-projects with preparation funding to do climate vulnerability assessments, etc., but also develop these projects to bankability. We also have $55 million for the climate finance facility, and of course, as I mentioned, the embedded generation program. There are a few things that are busy cooking at the moment. We are quite excited with working with Marcus. I don't know if he's still on the call, but there is a program that we're looking at in South Africa around a waste flagship program, where we initially designed the program focusing predominantly on organic waste, but we're now trying to expand this to include plastic waste as well. So it's an integrated municipal waste program that we are busy exploring with the GCF currently. So quite excited, and we collaborating with the Alliance to End Plastic Waste to submit a proposal to GCF to get preparation support initially, and then hopefully design this program and go back to GCF for funding to implement. Currently, we're also busy. We've just started designing a program for the Southern African region, and I think it's important to mention this particular initiative because of this particular call, where we may have a number of entities operating in the SADC region. So it's a program that we are developing that looks at using early warning systems and climate information to inform climate resilient water investment, water investment infrastructure in the SADC region. We managed to secure funding from GCF to do some preparation work, and we just submitted a draft proposal at the moment. But still, a lot more work needs to be done before we believe, we can go to board. So hopefully over the next few months, we hope to advance this particular submission to the GCF, for a regional program. So I'll just spend maybe 1 minute on each facility, just to give you a sense of how we've the type of programs we've developed with GCF funding. So the first one is a climate finance facility, which in a nutshell is a facility set up to crowd in private sector funding. So we use the concessional loan from GCF, blend those funds with DBSA sources of funding at the facility level. And then we would, at least the DBSA's commitment would be at a program level, and then we would crowd in additional funding, private sector funding at a sub-project level. This facility is essentially a credit enhancement mechanism where we offer, long-term loans to clients, up to 15 years or more in some cases, and we also offer subordinated debt. We cover 4 countries through this facility: Eswatini, Lesotho, South Africa, and Namibia. Again, the ultimate objective is to de-risk projects using GCF funding and crowding in private sector. In a very similar manner, the embedded generation program operates, as a credit enhancement mechanism as well. The difference is it's a program dedicated specifically towards renewable energy projects in South Africa, 10 megawatts and above. The whole idea with this program was to complement what the REAP program, or the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer program, has done. That program, as you may be aware, is very much dependent on sovereign guarantees or government guarantees. And the idea was to look at the alternative way of supporting renewable energy projects in South Africa in the absence of sovereign guarantees. So once again, still trying to crowd in private sector, but using GCF concessionality and these blended finance support to crowd in a private sector for solar PV, large-scale solar PV and wind projects. This is my last slide, or at least the last slide on one of the programs, which is the more recent one. And this is the water reuse program, which is very much an adaptation-focused project. The idea behind this program, again, is to build a new asset class within the water space. And private sector hasn't been as much involved in this space, and we would like to change the narrative and the way private sector invest in water reuse projects. And we hope, through the establishment of this particular program with GCF, which we believe is the first of its kind, and there are, there's a lot of interest to replicate this model or this approach in other countries as well, with GCF support. So the whole idea is to create this new financial asset class, and again, use GCF funding in terms of blending it with other sources of funding. With this program, we also included a significant preparation funding facility as well, where we would support some of these projects with early stage preparation work to take it to bankability, since it's a sector that requires that type of support, especially based on the beneficiaries, which are municipalities. This is my final slide. I think I have probably 1 minute. So having shared, I guess, some of the key lessons, perhaps some suggestions or advice around accreditation, some of the benefits that we believe, GCF can offer based on our context as a national development bank, or a regional development bank for that matter, in the sense that we do operate in the region. And having already, developed programs with GCF support, even though, it wasn't easy. We did have some challenges in terms of getting these programs off the ground, in terms of dealing with issues such as Forex risk. And I think you'll need a whole separate workshop just to maybe share experiences around that. But nonetheless, despite, all those bottlenecks that we faced, since our first approval, and in fact, since our first accreditation with the GCF, we believe that, our accreditation with the GCF has helped us transition the bank's portfolio to a greener one. And in fact, when you go through accreditation, there is a lot of scrutiny around the portfolio. When you apply for re-accreditation after every 5 years, I'm not too sure whether that process would now change moving forward with the new discussions. There's even more scrutiny on your portfolio. So it kind of, allows you to evaluate constantly, where you're going as an institution in terms of, especially if you're planning to make strong commitments around net zero. We believe that, GCF does allow you to transition to that greener portfolio in a quicker way. I already mentioned the use of GCF funds to crowd in private sector. All our programs had that as a very key objectives, apart from, the very primary objective of meeting, climate mitigation and adaptation targets. I think it does allow you to also strengthen your reporting in terms of your climate reporting, and being a member of the International Development Finance Club, where you do report to them as well. The accreditation with GCF, there is obviously a strong emphasis on ensuring that your reporting processes and templates that you use are aligned to their requirements. And what we have seen already is climate indicators that typically, and also adaptation indicators, beyond mitigation, are now embedded within our development results kind of framework. And I believe the programs that we're currently implementing, had a lot to do with ensuring that those elements are more prominent in the reporting that we do as a DFI. I already mentioned, as a regional accredited entity, we've tried our best to assist where we can a number of entities in the region, either through platforms such as these, or dialogues that we've had, engagements that we've had, bilaterals with various organizations. So we felt that it was important to ensure that more entities are accredited. They can cover areas that, for example, DBSA may not be part of DBSA's core mandate, as an example. So we would want to ensure that there are other entities that cover the full spectrum of GCF result areas are also accredited. And for us, it's quite key that we also want to work with various partners in the region. And I think it was highlighted earlier, and I think Carlos might have alluded to this as well. You don't necessarily have to be accredited to access, the funds from GCF. You can work with an existing accredited entity that covers, the particular region, and you can then collaborate to be a executing partner for a particular initiative in that particular location. So I think that's something also worth considering, because that could also allow you to build a track record and have one or two projects in your bag that's very much climate focused, and use that as a basis for accreditation. So that's something to also perhaps consider. So yeah, I think I'll leave it at that and hand over to Carlos for any questions in the remaining time that we have. Thank you so much. And I don't know if Olympus is still on the call, if there's anything else he just wanted to add, perhaps.
Nothing to add, Mohammed. That was perfect.
Okay, so thank you so much.
Thank you. It was indeed. Thank you so much, Mohammed. And you talked a lot, so you can drink a little bit. You are allowed now to drink and breathe. No, thank you. It was very, I think it gives us a real overview on the different stages, on the complexity of it, and the need to coordinate really between the different teams working in the development bank that is applying for accreditation. We have a question, so I will keep mine for later if we don't have enough. But there is someone who is registered under iPhone. So if you can introduce yourself, and team, if you can unmute this person to allow for the question. You can ask a question now. Please unmute yourself and introduce yourself if you can. Thank you.
Alors, je suis Philippe Akoa du FEICOM. Je ne sais pas si je me fais comprendre.
Oui, on vous entend très bien, Philippe.
Je me fais comprendre?
Oui, Philippe, on vous entend très bien.
Bon, enfin, j'ai pas de retour de Carlos, mais ce que je voudrais poser comme question, c'est que j'ai suivi la présentation de Monsieur Biwolé qui a effectivement fait ressortir le processus qui est très long pour l'accréditation. Et puis, la présentation que Mohamed vient de faire également confirme tout cela. Et lui, il est allé encore plus loin en présentant justement dans le cas de la DBSA le fait que le tout n'est pas l'accréditation, mais on peut avoir été accrédité, mais après avoir accès au financement, c'est aussi toute une autre longue procédure. Alors, je voudrais dire que peut-être, je voudrais poser la question dans le cadre de ce webinaire. Donc, puisque nous sommes en train de nous mettre en réseau, est-ce que de façon pratique, par exemple, le FEICOM pourrait avoir connaissance des présentations qui, effectivement, enfin, des demandes de financement qui ont été présentées au fond vert? Donc, peut-être pour pouvoir mieux s'en inspirer, parce qu'il a été longuement parlé des questions qui ont trait à une banque de projets. Et je le dis d'autant plus que, bon, je pense que ce soit les problèmes d'adaptation ou également même de mitigation peuvent se présenter de la même façon dans divers pays, puisqu'il a été aussi question des programmes sous-régionaux. Est-ce qu'on ne peut pas imaginer qu'un projet qui a été présenté au niveau de l'Afrique du Sud soit également présenté au niveau du Cameroun, avec une adaptation aussi peut-être au contexte local? Donc, c'est ce que je voudrais poser comme question. Donc, je vous remercie. Mhm.
Merci beaucoup, Philippe. Je ne sais pas si vous nous entendez, mais on a bien compris votre question. Mohamed, do you want to answer this first question?
Sorry, Carlos, do you want me to come in?
Yes, you can.
Oh, sorry.
Did you understand the question? It's okay?
Yes, I
Okay.
had the interpretation on, so I understood the question. So yeah, I'll come in, and Olympus can obviously add as well. So what I understood is, there are obviously initiatives that, for example, DBSA has already developed, which could be, something that, one could replicate elsewhere in other parts of the region. I think that's a very, important point, and it's precisely the approach that we've also looked at when we design these programs, and you'll often see that South Africa is often the targeted country initially, and the reason for that is we needed a kind of a test case in terms of where we believe this could be developed, and it's more out of convenience more than anything else, but of course based on the specific barriers that we've seen in the South African context. Nonetheless, we've always tried to ensure that there is potential for replicating these type of initiatives elsewhere, not only in Africa, but also other continents. We've seen that as an example with the water reuse program, even though we're still at the very early stage of implementation. But when we designed that program with GCF, and we worked very closely with Amgad, very early on, it was a very innovative approach in terms of approaching financing, especially getting private sector involved in this sector. So there was a lot of interest to see how this model could be adopted in other parts of the world. And, we've used various forums, including the last COP engagements, and the previous COP as well, to share those approaches. And even today, we've had a lot of since the approval, there's been a lot of interest, to share these programs with other entities in different parts of the world. So certainly that's something that is an objective not only for GCF but also for DBSA. There is interest to see how we can expand the work that we're doing, with the climate finance facility as an example, to go beyond the 4 countries, engaging with other entities, other national development banks that want to establish similar facilities, such as, I think Olympus has been engaging, for example, in Uganda, where they're looking at establishing a climate finance facility. So we do have those bilaterals. with institutions that are interested in exploring some of these facilities or programs which they believe, could be of interest to their respective countries. So as a matter of interest, a lot of the program information is available in the public domain. So if you go onto the GCF website and you choose, you can even go to the accredited entity name, and you'll see the list of projects there. So there is a lot of detail around these specific programs and projects. But certainly, yes, I think the possibility of replicating what you don't want to reinvent the wheel and start from scratch in other countries. So by all means, where possible, where some of these initiatives can be adapted in other countries, that's something that needs to be explored.
Thank you, Muhammed. I think that it's also important to underline the fact. Sorry, Olympus, you wanted to step in.
No, Carlos, I think the sound came from elsewhere.
Okay. It was maybe Philippe. Philippe, vous vouliez...
Non, je voulais rien dire. J'ai très bien compris les explications données par Mohamed.
D'accord. Okay, merci. No, I was just saying that what is also important to underline is that all national and subnational development banks do not have the same kind of high quality financial engineering capacity that DBSA has. So I would complement Philippe's question. I think it's important, obviously, and this is why these kind of platforms like the Alliance exist, IDFC exists, etc. I think that there is the readiness funds that are helping some of the banks to go through the accreditation process, understand what they can do and how they can progress in the implementation of the norms and standards, etc. I think that we need to think also to put the pressure on certain donors to help specifically the NDBs and SDBs to have this kind of real exchange based on experience. And as you said, Muhammad, also a lot of those programs that you have developed are very recent. So you are just still ongoing in the process of implementing them also. We'll see how it goes. And specifically with the private sector mobilization, which is very, very hard in certain contexts and countries, especially when it goes to funding and financing projects coming from local governments when they don't have SPVs, when the facilities are not really strong in terms of transparency and financial processes. So that's one thing. But I think that I wanted to ask a first question before going there. Did you have some kind of evaluation at DBSA's level on how much it has costed to DBSA for the whole process to be implemented internally? What kind of human resources did you dedicate? How many human resources? How long did it take to you? And once we know that South Africa and DBSA are at that level of financial engineering, it's also important for everyone to understand that what you said and what I just wrote also in the chat is that you can become an executing entity first, to have a first track record, test your ability to absorb also the demand and the kind of processes you need to implement, especially on the emissions definition targeting. But just as a first basic question, and I don't know if you have a precise number or reference, but how much it costed to DBSA quantitatively and qualitatively and quantitatively to go with this process, and how much support did you get from the national authorities to do so? I think it's also important because you are of course the NDB in South Africa, so how much it has helped you to fulfill that commitment that you did.
So I think this is a question for my boss, Olympus. I think you'll be best placed. But I think before Olympus comes in, just on the previous question, I think just to add what you mentioned, Carlos, apart from readiness support, we've also benefited quite a bit from the preparation support, just to build that pipeline. So The water reuse program, as an example, we initially benefited through the grant funding from GCF to actually design the program. And then post that, we submitted the application to GCF. The CFF and the Embedded Generation Program was all blood, sweat, and tears, for using our own resources. So I think subsequent to those two programs, we decided to also tap into the PPF modality quite a bit. So I just wanted to add that. But I'm going to hand over to Olympus to answer that very important question you had, Carlos. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Mohammed. Carlos, I guess that the short answer is that we haven't quantified, but I'll give you maybe the qualitative side of it. Something that was very key for us was that earlier on, I think probably now 12 years ago, our government, through our Department of Environment, decided to put together a national green fund. And then the DBSA was asked to be an implementing partner for that green fund. Now, this was the benefit to us of doing that. Through the green fund, we managed to build a portfolio of projects in the broader green space, which was then instrumental for us in getting our initial accreditation to the Global Environmental Facility. So what was key about this is that our partnership with the department included, putting together a team to implement that National Green Fund, pretty much at the cost of government. But at the same time, because this fund was sitting within the DBSA, it made logical sense to then use that as a base, first to get accredited to the Global Environmental Facility. And then, as Muhammad mentioned, then we got accelerated into the GCF accreditation. So to a great extent, we benefited from that partnership with government through the Department of Environment to build the track record, to have the warm bodies to carry out the work that was necessary. So to a great extent, with little cost to the bank as balance sheet. But obviously the benefit has accrued not only to the bank, but also to, nationally with regard to programs that Muhammad has already talked to that help the government respond to our NDCs from a target point of view. So, yeah, but, in terms of the exact, quantitative number, we don't have that. Maybe it's a challenge to carry that exercise out and next time be able to give you that figure. Thanks, Carlos.
No, thank you so much. It's very clear. And I think it's a very crucial point that you underline here, the support from the national government, the fact that you have been empowered and also given a responsibility to go further, that made you somehow the entity that you became with all this blending that Muhammad has presented, also coming from different sources of climate funds. I think it's very key that you are really empowered, really designated as an entity that needs to go further in the exploration, and then getting the funding off balance sheet, in balance sheet, to make sure that you can proceed with that responsibility is very key. And I think it's often what is lacking, this understanding from the national authorities that they need to support and strengthen the capacities of their national development banking system and ecosystem, especially when it comes to funding and financing local governments projects. So I think it's a first stage of conversation, of framing at the political level, that also creates somehow confidence amongst the partners that are supporting the entity. So it's a very important, and I knew you wouldn't have the numbers, but I tried. It's always the kind of process, but I mean, it takes time. It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of consistency also, because you have been there the whole time. I mean, it's also brings the fact that the fact that we have so many people that are living and coming in the institutions, and for the follow-up of this kind of processes, it's very key that the people who understood the processes, who were there historically to remind why and who decided, because the governments also change, and the teams in the government. So I think it's very key, this consistency. Again, I think everyone heard from DBSA the fact that you are somehow available to support other development banks in sub-Saharan Africa, and we'll make sure that, of course, we will share the presentations, we will share the contacts, and maybe whenever you think that you can organize a longer session that you are doing for other development banks and can be available also for others, we can disseminate the dates and support you in aggregating the demand. But of course, we will try to convince also some of our partners and donors to make sure that we can have more and more of these support exercises, more in details, more in depth, with some of the employees of certain development banks that have issues in terms of internal means to follow up with those processes. So this is somehow, I forgot the expression, a work in progress, sorry. But I don't know if we have other questions to DBSA. I think we need to conclude, even though most of the people remained in the call. That's the interest that we have for the topic. And we will remind you of the former webinar that we had with Rhonda also, in the report coming from the session. That way you will access also the conversation we had and the presentations we had and the report that we did. That way you can always have access to the resources. So if there is no other question, then again, I would like to thank all the speakers for joining, and DBSA and FEICOM and of course, Marcus from GCF. We will get back to you, and don't hesitate to send us questions if you have, or demands for contacts. We will make sure that there will be a follow-up, obviously, and we will try to have another exercise, another workshop in July, especially regarding the preparation of COP30 in Belém. We will have then more information on what we can do there, how much we can give visibility to the Alliance and its membership, and of course for you to join with your national delegations to make sure that you bring also your demand to the highest level in those contexts. Thank you again, Olympus, Muhammed, Marcus, and Jean-Aloïse, and Philippe, who joined the conversation. And we will send you all the elements by the end of the week. Don't worry, and the reports also. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Merci.